Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 219 of Retropower Uncut. And as usual, we are here in the fabrication shop. There's a slight mist in the air at the moment, slight haze in the air, because Matt's just been generating a bit of smoke over there, but we'll come on to that in a minute. We're going to start with the Saab. There'll be a very brief mention. The owner of the Aston Martin DBS project, lurking in the background there, actually visited this week, so it was great to have a chat with him, and we're all very excited to move forward with the project. And there are lots of things going on, just not in here at the moment. They will be going on shortly in here, but at the moment they're all in the ether of the CAD den, so I'm going to let George talk about that a bit later on. So we'll touch on that in a bit, but not in here. Moving on to things that are happening in here, the Saab, Project Wasabi, and a lot of progress is being made on that. Bobby's very busy on that, and as you can see, there's a large piece of fabrication here on the side. There's been quite a lot of going forwards and backwards on this in terms of working out how to generate the structure in the places that we need it to be, and to mean that the fabrication doesn't become too involved in terms of the doors. Obviously, we need to make a new sill structure to replace the sill structure that was removed from the Audi S4 floor pan, the outer sill that was removed from the Audi S4, and we don't want to replace it with the same structure that was on the Saab, because frankly that was a fairly horrible structure. So what you can see there is the new sill structure. It looks a bit strange on the side of the car as it is at the moment. That's because there's a lot more car to come down here. But you have to remember that the outer panel work of this car is going to be made in carbon fibre and doesn't exist at the moment. So the bottom of the Saab quarter panel has been removed for access, and this new sill structure is being generated, which will become one with the rest of the structure of the car. But at the moment it's screwed on so it can be removed with the Saab body, because the upper part, the Saab body, still needs to be removed several times yet. So Bobby's planning ahead all the time to work out which bits still need to be removable, because he then needs to be able to remove them and refit them. So it's quite complicated to explain. But this shape of this structure was developed over time. Bobby made various narrow sections, folded them on the press brake to known dimensions, to trial fit them, to check exactly how things were going to work. And all of that was done in conjunction with the revision of the door structure. The complication being that the Saab uses a slightly strange sealing setup, and the seal basically seals against this corner all the way down here, all the way down this corner. It's actually a seal onto a corner, and then it rolls down, and the shape of the bottom of the door is very odd. The door carries on all the way around the underneath on the Saab, and the sill is above it, and it actually seals from underneath. And we're revising that sealing setup to seal onto the outer face of the sill along here. And we actually tried a more slim profile of sill, but it overcomplicated the door sealing system. So we've actually revised that again, and Bobby's done some cardboard aided design at the front to try and work out the best way for rerouting the door seal down here. We need to move the door hinges outboard by a reasonable distance to allow for the widening of the car. The side of the door, the whole side of the car is being widened. It varies down the width of the car, but let's say a nominal 60 millimeters wider. And because of that, we need to move the door hinge centre outboard as well to allow for that, so that the door can actually open and close without the door smashing into the wing and various other problems. And in doing that, it removes one of the constraints that Saab would work with. They moved the door seal line right in down here because the door hinge pivots were quite close into the pillar, and it meant that the door pillar was very, very thin. It wasn't a particularly nice arrangement. Well, because we're moving those hinge pivots outboard, we can actually move the door seal line outboard and simplify the door seal line here, which we've done. So we're going to bring the door seal line straight down here and then outboard to the sill. Again, originally the door seal line didn't follow that route there, but we're actually changing that, and we're modifying the lower part of the door. Again, the outer part of the door will be carbon fibre, the skin will be carbon fibre, and we're refabricating the lower part of the door frame in steel to take that outer skin. And the height of the door will actually change as well compared to originally. It's a slightly complicated area compared to if you rewind to the Allegro project, where we also did a similar job with a floor pan change there. the doors were quite simple. That was a lot simpler. We basically replicated the shut lines of the Allegro doors originally, but we could do that whilst maintaining a fair bit of sill strength. If we replicate the Saab shut line, we basically have no real sill strength. The Saab had a very weak sill originally, and we would be possibly even slightly weaker again because we've lost some of the space that the Saab had. So we need to revise that completely, which is what we've done. So this is the sill structure that we've ended up with. Here, this will all be built into a new door pillar. Remember, this is the Audi inner pillar. This is the inner skin. It's actually double skin, but it's actually the Audi S4 inner skin of the pillar. The outer pillar has been removed. That was sort of out here somewhere. We're then going to rebuild this pillar, which will actually come out and then chamfer into this sill structure here. So there'll be a new door pillar built here with the receivers for the new door hinges, which will actually be the Saab door hinges but moved further outboard. So all of that is yet to be built. So Bobby is fabricating the sill, which is now done. Folded that in our I say new, it's very old, but new to us, Bronx press brake. Folded those, done both sides there, and then he's been fabricating the upper part, which is, I can't really point at very well on camera, but the upper face here then gains some shape at the back. It's very straight along through the door, but it then gains shape where it meets the original S4 floor pan and has to mate with the original S4 sill flange, because that's quite an organic shape. So Bobby's generated a flange there, which is going to be spot welded to the top of this to meet that original Audi S4 sill flange. And then the bit of rust that was originally on the Audi was the rear part of the inner sill where it goes into the inner wheel arch. There was a bit of corrosion there. It's about the only piece on the car where there was corrosion on a part that we were actually still going to use. So Bobby's just done a repair on that and repaired there's like a triangular section at the back of the sill. He's just repaired, not unlike the bit that always rusts on a Mark 1 Golf actually, funnily enough, the bit where near where the rear beam mounts are, the one bit that always rusts on every Mark 1 Golf. It's similar design on this. See the old VW Audi Group heritage in that little shaped piece at the back of the sill. But he's just repaired that, done that, and then that's going to eventually, once we can actually weld the two bits of car together, there's a closing plate that's going to close off the back of the sill, close off the wheel arch, and tie into that bit that's just been repaired on the inner sill and close off all of that area. And then we've got to put some drain holes in the bottom of the sill. Just on this corner here, there'll be some drain holes that then tie into the inner sill and allow the whole lot to water drain. As I say, this will all be tied into the A-pillar. It's coming together quite well. So yeah, some nice fabrication going on there. You see also the section underneath here, because the original Audi door shut line is actually down the centre of this, and there's a section of sill being built over the top, which actually carries the sill on further inboard than the original Audi sill. So that's what's under here. There's actually a channel section fabricated in here. Again, will all be spot welded together. And then the top of the sill here, this will have a trim over it, and this is actually going to be have oval slots in here, which will be puddle welded onto the top of the original inner to outer sill flange on the Audi. So all quite hard to explain, but hopefully Jamie's many bits of B-roll will cover all that bit quite well, because it's quite awkward for me to explain. But good progress. Bobby's doing sterling work on getting the fabrication done on this, and quite tricky work. The door area, we've had quite a lot of conversations backwards and forwards, quite a lot of discussions, quite a lot of working out of how the hell to do the door, because the Saab sealing system is not the most logical in its original layout. It's definitely been a design of evolution rather than a clean sheet design, and we're then evolving it again. So we're trying to clean sheet a couple of areas of it to stop it being a bit of a cobble up. Moving on from that, we're going to go on to E-Type. Matthew has been very busy on this. The guys upstairs have been busy as well, hence these parts, but I'm going to let them talk about that. And we're going to talk about the metal bits, the metal work that's been involved. Matt's been finishing off these, I don't know what you call them, whether you call these a sail panel or what. These little upper finishers that tie the roof line, or the roof mounting line, into the quarter panel, these little finisher panels. One of these was on last week. Matt still had to do the other one, that side. And in putting that on, he discovered a little bit of a discrepancy in the shape of the quarter panel here on that side. It didn't really flow quite correctly into that panel. There was a slightly too high shoulder line, which didn't flow perfectly in. He's had to just tweak that a little bit. So Matt's done a little bit of reshaping on that and just adjusted that slightly, and then got that sail panel modified, because they're not the best fit anyway. They're a fairly generic pressing that's not that great. So he's done some finishing work on that and got that to fit perfectly, got all that in place. There's a few hours, that's taken me not very long to explain, strangely, but actually quite a few hours of work involved in that, getting that to fit perfectly, but he's done a really nice job of that and got that basically perfect. There's going to be a little bit of lead loading involved, but the door shut all has to be leaded anyway, and this joint to that little sail panel to the quarter is all leaded anyway. So that's not really a great problem. There's quite a lot of lead loading in that area anyway, so that'll all be dealt with by that. He's then moved on to the boot lid. I think last week you saw that he'd done some reshaping of the edges of the boot lid because the boot lid didn't really fit that well. The original one that we had with the car did fit, but that actually had to go to another customer. That didn't belong to us, and its replacement didn't fit quite as well. So Matt's had to do some re-edging work on that and adjust the corners of the panel, which he's done a nice job of. And he's then prepped the frame, got all the frame ready and nice, got everything epoxy coated inside here and there. He's then added a panel. There was some discussion between Matt and the car's owner and Cal about adding a little reinforcement. Where you push down on the boot lid to shut it, to latch it, they tend to gain a dent there. So he's actually added an epoxied in double skin in that area before putting the frame into the boot lid. Inside, it's actually hidden by the frame, so it's inside the frame. There's actually a reinforcer epoxied into that now to prevent that denting locally. And then he's fitted the frame. He'd previously trimmed the frame to get that to an even 4mm gap all the way around to the boot lid, which will shrink a bit by the time the paintwork's done on the car, and get that down to about an 1/8 of an inch gap, which is about where we'd be aiming to be. But that gap had crept a little bit. I'm just going to swing around there slightly just to keep Jamie on his toes. But that gap had crept a little bit this side. So Matt's just done a little bit of edge welding on that panel there just to get that gap right. It's pretty much bang on now. And then he's done some tweaking of all the surface of the rear panels of the car just to get the heights all exactly right, because there were various bits that didn't flow in well. So he's tweaked a few bits here, he's tweaked this corner a bit to get that right, tweaked the corner there to get the gap right. Basically done a lot of finessing. There's probably a day's work in just finessing all of the panel heights of the panels on the car and on the tail and on the actual boot lid, just to get everything to flow in nicely. And it's pretty good now. The two rear corners need a little bit of work, but they're both going to need a little bit of lead. There'll be a tiny bit of lead work there and a tiny bit of lead work there anyway, to get those to flow in nicely. But yeah, that's all come together really, really well now. Happy with that, happy with that. At that point, he moved on to the fuel filler, which is obviously a 3D printed plastic thing at the moment. Matt had done a couple of little mock-ups to check that things were going to work and things were going to fall into place. It looked like it was going to be okay. But we wanted to do the final one a little bit more precisely from CAD, so drew that up in Fusion 360 in sheet metal, meaning then we can, the patterns, the blanks if you like, the patterns to make that part could all be cut on the CNC plasma. It just makes for a very accurate way of making a cone. Making a cone from a paper pattern, you've got to be very, very, very accurate. You know, 0.5 millimetre either way on a cone of the sort of size that's involved in that recess. 0.5 mil either way makes a huge difference to the final part. So we CNC drew that on CAD, CNC cut the parts to that, and then I actually rolled them up and welded them up the other afternoon. After Matt had finished actually the other day and did those bits, and so hence it looks rather like a pie dish. So I couldn't resist writing Frey Bentos on it because it looked decidedly like something I wanted to actually pucker pies. I think that actually it's nearer a pucker pie. I think that one. Yeah, it looked very much like your sort of fish and chip shop pie dish. So I couldn't resist writing that on it. Yeah, Matt's then got a centre line cast down the car. He was busy with his string line this morning, getting that centre line put down the car, got that worked out, got it bang on, marked out, and then cut out the frame underneath as well. We had to do a little trim on that, notch that slightly to get that in. Got the rear, I don't know what you call that panel, I forgot what that, rear tonneau panel, whatever you would call that. He's got that cut out, got the dish in, got that screwed in place. That can't now be finally fixed and finalised until we actually have the machined parts for the filler cap. The neck and the cap are going to be machined from aluminium, and we need that to, I can't remember whether it's closing at that angle or at that angle, I can't remember which. I think it's going crossways, but either way it needs to tighten up exactly in that position. So we need to have the machine parts, then we can tighten them together so that we know the exact angle they tighten at, and then at that point we can then mark out and drill the holes, put the captive nuts in, which we want to remove that filler bowl to do, because it's going to be awkward to do from underneath, and then we can fit the filler bowl, weld it in place, and then that will be leaded in, hence this slight recess here. That will all be planished in and then welded in and then leaded into there, so that's a perfectly smooth return into that filler bowl, into that neck in there. That's going to look pretty smooth, and obviously that bowl will also have a drain tube raised into it that will then run water out and into the wheel arch via a flexible pipe, so that will all look super neat. So very happy with that, but yeah, we can't finalise that until we have the machine parts now, so that's going to sit there screwed in. Matt's then going around doing various finishing off jobs. There are various bits of weld that needed finishing that hadn't been completed, and also bits of trimming the inner wheel arches, just a lot of little finishing off bits that is always inevitable to do. So Matt's just starting to go through those now and getting some of those ticked off. So that's where things are at on the E-Type. Moving on from that, we'll go over to the XJC. Can talk about this from here. Now I'm, if anything, slightly less familiar with all of the bits that Stu's been beavering away on here, because in true Stu fashion, he's just been beavering away in the background, quietly getting on with things. He has been working on the battery cable routing, getting that put through the car, getting that laid in and make sure there's provision for it. Where that goes through the rear bulkhead, he's added, he's put in a cover for that, a cover plate for that to protect it, but also rather than just routing the cable through the bulkhead and trying to grommet it through safely, obviously there's a little bit of danger involved in passing that by sharp edges where we've got a limitation on what protection we can put in. So they've put, Stu's put a pass-through connector through the bulkhead so that we've got a bolted lug connection on that battery cable both sides of that rear bulkhead, and that's all nicely protected, and then it's got a cover on it to prevent any damage to that in the event of a crash or in the event of rubbing from the seat and all that sort of thing. So that's all well protected. So battery cables now pretty much getting there. Stu's just putting the final bits together on that. Onto the steering column. Now the customer the changes to this car are quite subtle, and we're generally in agreement with the customer on most of this, because these were just pretty nice things to start with. There's not an awful lot we want to change, but one of the things we did want to change is to backdate the steering column, because this car is a Series 2-3 in terms of the dash arrangement and that side of things, and actually the customer preferred the Series 1 appearance and the switchgear and the layout of the Series 1, and one of the things on the Series 1 is it doesn't have the ignition barrel on the steering column. So Stu's been investigating the upper steering column and working out what can and can't be done in terms of that. There's a plan in place. I have to say it's a plan I'm not entirely familiar with, so I'm not going to elaborate on it greatly. Cal and Stu have been liaising on that, but certainly the plan is to change the steering column now completely to, I believe, to the earlier type, but I know that there's some details involved in getting the switchgear to fit, so there's various plans afoot there, but Stu's basically been investigating what can and can't be done in terms of the steering column to achieve the non-steering lock on the column. So that's what's been going on there. And then additionally, and the major piece of work that's been occurring also at the back of the car, is that the filler neck, we touched upon it previously, we're modifying the car to use the Aston style fuel filler caps. And in order to do that, we've got to modify the fuel filler recesses, not in terms of their shape, but in terms of the mounting plates that are in there, because originally the fuel filler caps basically fitted directly to the tank, and there was, directly to the car, plug into the tank, and they are their own sort of bezel that goes into the recess in the back of into the recess in the body shell. And using the aftermarket type Aston caps that the owner wants to use and that we want to use, you lose that piece. So what we've concluded is that we're going to machine our own, or we're going to get machined, we won't machine them in-house, but we're going to design in-house and get machined new filler necks to take those Aston fill caps that then neatly fill the recesses in the body, will screw into the recesses in the body and interface with the fuel tank, and generally tidy all of that area up. But where the screws were positioned on the original Jaguar filler caps doesn't enable us to fit that Aston cap. Two of the screws actually interfere with the filler cap, so we've had to move them. So Stu's made new counter plates, new nut plates if you like, for those new, yet to be made filler cap mounts to screw to, and got those installed into the car. So now we have something to screw those into. So now we're into the hands of designing the fuel filler cap lower halves, if you like. The bit the lid hinges on has got to be designed, and once that's designed, then we can screw that into these mounting plates that are in the car. I think I'm bound to have missed something on this because I'm slightly out of kilter with what's going on, but I think that pretty much wraps up where we're at on that. It really is at the detail stage now. Okay, contrary to how things look, it's a lot simpler in terms of modifications than a lot of the cars we're building at the moment, because a lot of it is basically as Jag intended, or more or less bolt-on changes to what Jag intended, with the exception of some of the interior work. But most of that interior work is parts that will bolt on to the original Jaguar substructure. So refreshingly, compared to a lot of what we're doing, a lot of it is actually relatively straightforward stuff. And I think that almost wraps up what was going on in here. I've just glanced over there to do a handover to Mark and actually noticed, I'll do a slight aside, and I've actually done something on my own car this week. I'm going to have a gulp of tea. Yeah, I've actually done something on this. You'll have noticed the Autograss car lurking in the workshop, with me desperately trying to find the odd bit of time. But I managed to do a couple of hours in a couple of evenings and done a bit of fuel tank fabricating. So as a little aside, been doing that. There's further work to do on it yet, but it's quite a tight fit where the tank's got to go in that. So I've actually managed to get a couple of hours in and got a bit of aluminium stuck together to start getting a fuel tank put together for it. One of many little jobs that I've got to get done before it's a complete car. But anyway, moving on from that, I'm going to hand over to Mark to take you through the body shop progress, because again, lots of things going on lots of different angles there. So over to Mark.
All right, welcome back to a new year. Hope you all had a good Christmas. We've got loads to come this year, starting with this. This hopefully next week is going to go to paint, fingers crossed. So yeah, you'll be able to see what colour it is. It's all ready, masked, ready to go in the booth. The lads have prepped it. It's all good. Just got to check for, well, probably have one little last check, because Gaz's eyesight's not as good as it used to be. He has big font on his phone, don't you, Gaz?
Old man font.
Old man font. He reckons it saved his eyes, but...
We'll wear them out too quick.
So yeah, you're going to see the colour hopefully next week. Like I say, all inside, engine bay's matte black. I'll show you in a minute the bonnet and the boot lid. We've done matte black, direct, that's direct to metal paint, as wheels like people always ask on the questions or the comments. So yeah, it's matte black in the engine bay, matte black on the inside of the bonnet, matte black on the inside of the boot lid, and on the top where the parcel shelf goes. So when Rich does his trimming magic, if there is a little bit where he hasn't got to the edge because he's a bit crap, no, he's not really, he's good and he's a good lad. Yeah, it's all black, so you won't see any like bits. They do a blend in. So yeah, so that's that. If we go this way, Jamie, come on. We won't do the Crystal Maze music this time. It's old out. Right, that's on. So like I just said a minute ago, I've just done the bonnet this morning, matte black on the inside with the direct paint. Super good. 10% thinners in it, smooths it out really nice, real stealth looking, like matte black. And it's really durable, really durable. And like I say, the boot lid as well. I'll turn it so Jamie has to do less work. I'm good to him as well. Good to everybody. Everybody I'm good to. So this, it looks a bit rough still on the inside, but this all gets trimmed. Everything gets trimmed. We just want to do the matte black so it don't show like all the bits, but it's good enough. That's it, that's done. I've also done bits in here, but I'm not going to explain. I did some Allegro engine mounts for the Honda engine. Jamie's missed that because he's a busy man. Editing here, the den. Doesn't get enough credit, this lad. Anyway, while we're here still, go down now, subscribe if you haven't, because the more subscribers get, the better we look. No, we want to get that 100,000 plaque Got to get there. Gonna get there. Comment away is one. Even if you want it to be bad comments, we don't care. You don't hurt us. Just stab us in the heart. But yeah, we like the comments. Comment on whatever you want. Comment on what colour you reckon the Jensen's going to be. Come on, let's see who gets the closest. Comment away. So yeah. What else? What else, Jamie? What else? Let's go and have a look at the Cozzy. Come on. Let's go and have a look at the Cozzy. Also some Allegro door trims. They're done in the same black, nice stealth looking. All right, I'll shut the door, save the polar bears. Right, rubbish Mini. All right. All right, so here she is, all polished. Jamie showed you footage in the booth of us flat and polishing it. Tedious process, but it looks amazing. Probably now we've got it in natural light, we've just got to go over and just sort some little bits out, but the booth light is too bright, sometimes you can't see it's better sometimes with a head torch with the light off, as the detailers would say. But it's not far away for some snake oil to go on it. But yeah, so this is complete now, all the bits are done, bumpers, side skirts, arches, the whole lot shebang. Done, so it should be ready to pick up soon, hopefully. So enjoy this. Jamie's probably got a montage around it to show you while I'm talking away, and I'll see you next week.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. That's very good. And I think at that point we're going to hand over to Cal, let him take you through assembly shop and CAD den and actual den. So over to you, Cal.
Thank you very much, Nat. I'm going to start with this stunning looking machine in front of me, which I don't start with enough, Project Churchill. So we've got two prongs of attack on this at the minute, one mechanical and then interior based. So mechanically, I think last episode I talked about bearing gate and the fact we had finally got hold of the main and big end bearings for it, for the AJ16 engine we're using in this. So now they're actually able to progress very rapidly with the engine build on that. So pistons and rods are in, I think the crank was in last time. Starting to get the whole cam chain train together now. The new oil pump's gone in. I think the sump just went on today. One thing that stands out looking at those engines is the standard of engineering is fantastic. And it really was peak Jag. I don't want to delve up a whole debate about Jaguar's change of image. Sort of E-Type era to X308 or X300 era. The standard of engineering was extremely high, and you can see it in that engine. Just things like the way the power steering pump, which a lot of manufacturers would just buy in a power steering pump from someone, make a mount to bolt it on the side of the engine and put a belt to it. And on that AJ16, it's just this gorgeous kind of integrated thing that's shaft driven out of the back of the sort of cam train chain on it. It's just a nice thing, and they are so bulletproof. Famous last words, obviously we'll have the one that goes wrong, but they are a bulletproof engine. And that's actually the reason why the bearing supply is difficult, is that nobody ever really rebuilds them. And even the guys who are racing them, because though that era XJ is still, you can still get a scruffy one for less than £1,000. It doesn't really make sense to rebuild the engine when you can just buy a used car and swap the engine over into it. But yeah, lovely thing. And then interior has been the other prong of attack on this. So we're gearing up for Richard to take the next steps on it. We want to get on with making the back seat, and that necessitates having a couple of other things finalised. One's the centre console. So the whole of the centre console runs right into the back there, and the perimeter of that console, which will be upholstered, is being 3D printed in sections in a carbon fibre reinforced nylon material. And actually that's fine for final stuff. When it's not under any significant load, it's just a side panel, and it's done in a suitably temperature resistant material, and that carbon reinforced nylon is pretty decent temperature wise, you can use those things as final parts. The surface finishes aren't really suitable for a visible 3D printed finish, but when it's being upholstered it doesn't matter. So all of that is going to be final 3D printed parts that are upholstered, and the beauty of doing things that way is that we can, when we're designing our own parts, is that we can integrate details for all of the actual leather work on there. That's also the beauty of having Richard, who was standing here a minute ago, isn't anymore, having him in-house now means that that kind of go-between when we're designing parts for the interior, and he can say, you know, oh, I can probably stretch the leather around that radius, but you've got the opportunity to go, actually, no, the leather won't stretch around that radius. Can we make a slightly tighter radius on there, or we'll need a seam there, but let's put a groove in the material so the seam excess can sit into the groove and you don't get any bumping up of the leather around the seam. So we can really kind of go to town on making sure that the parts are suitable for leathering and in a fashion that will make sure that they're neat, so you don't get seams in places that are going to look ugly or intersecting seams in places you don't want them. The other thing that sort of we need to get in place as well for the back seat is the quarter cards. So they are a flat card that we've then designed a three-dimensional upper sort of surround for, and then a lower piece that the speakers are going into. Those pieces are also going to be 3D printed, so we've finished finalising all the details on those. We've got the seam grooves into those. We've done a little trial, which Luke will show you in a bit, on a part of one of those, just to make sure we could get the leather stretch on there and that the seam sat really nicely. And then we're going to sectionally 3D print those, also in carbon reinforced nylon, and then once those parts are in place and the centre console periphery is in place, then Richard can get on with the back seat, because we are going to completely fabricate and sculpt the back seat from scratch in this, and likewise the parcel shelf. So that's going to be the next stage: get those pieces in, get the centre console in, fabricate and sculpt all of the rear seat, and then that can be upholstered. Fabricate the parcel shelf, that can be upholstered, and then once we've got all the centre console and all of the three-dimensional parts of the rear quarter cards done, of course also they can be leathered and we can do the final parts there. And while all of that is in progress, we can move on to the door cards, where we've got the flat cards done. We've done all of the sort of visual design work. We just need to go through on those and do that final seam allowance work, making sure everything's going to mount just right, and just the final checks and tweaks before we move on to printing those bits as well. But yeah, it's going to be, I just can't wait to see all this come together. It's one of those, I think perhaps more than some of the cars, because there isn't another car that looks like this, you know, whereas some of the cars are kind of essentially the standard shape but with some changed components on them. This one there is not another car like this, and although I can sort of visualise it in my head how it's going to be, it's always exciting seeing it come together, so other people sort of start to see the vision coming together. So yeah, very, very cool, and excited to see that move on. Let's have a little wander over here. I'm going to actually wander this way and mention throttle bodies. So we're just in the process of assembling the throttle bodies for the Allegros. Now we've had these pieces made, so these are the little takeoffs that we've had machined that sandwich in between the manifold and the throttle body that give us our vacuum takeoffs. They've come back from black anodising, I think, since the last video, and we're just getting all of that lot assembled now. So once that's in the car, that pipe that splits between all the throttle bodies after the butterflies will then connect up to a vacuum reservoir, which will have our idle control valve on it, and also our feed out to the brake servo, which is a vacuum servo on there. So that's that. We're making some progress on interceptor stuff as well. So we've now disassembled all of the front upright assemblies, the wishbones, etc. We're prepping all of this lot to go away for surface finishing, so this lot's likely to get zinc plated and then Xylan coated over the top of that. And then one of the upcoming jobs actually is the steering arms, which these were made adjustable by Bobby when he was setting up all of the geometry on the car to dial out all of the bump steer and get the Ackerman angle correct. He made these adjustable so he could move the steering arm position up and down, in and out, and then it was just bolted in the right place. So we've now tacked all that up so it can't move, and then these will be handed over to the CAD guys, who will then translate this kind of mock-up to an actual part, which will be designed in CAD and then machined. So we have a custom steering arm that gives us the right geometry. So that's good. And then on here, Anthony has been just doing the first trial fit-up of the aircon pipe. So when we did the metalwork, Bobby decided, well, we all decided we wanted to do aluminium hard lines. Bobby did a kind of rough shaping of the hard lines, got them bolted in place, did all the mounting points, but at the time we had no way to do the end swaging on them. And if you've a longer term watcher, you'll know that Bobby said, oh, it's okay, I will make a tool. And he designed a tool to do the end swages to suit the O-ring type aircon hardline nuts. So Anthony's just doing a trial fit of all of that, just tweaking a few shapes just to get it fitting perfectly, and then we'll trim the ends in the right place and put the swages on for the end nuts. But it's just an awesome thing to be able to do in-house, because we can do OEM looking aluminium hardlines for the AC, swage all the ends in-house, so there's no faffing around trying to get them roughly right, sending them off somewhere, finding they're not quite right, etc. So really cool thing to be able to do in-house. And then interior, going back to interior and 3D prints actually. So on these, a lot of the interior is already done, albeit it's all in storage, but the parcel shelves are done, seats front and back are done for both cars, rear quarter cards are done, the door cards are done, all the centre console parts, the sort of floor mount centre console parts are done, but the main dash was one of the outstanding things, and we'd done all the CAD modelling work for how that was going to be, but now we're at the point we're actually transferring that over to being a real thing. So what we've done is we've used the original metal frame from the Allegro dash, because the interior visually is kind of inspired by the original. So the upper part of the dash is very similar to the original. We've deepened it a lot and added lower sections in a central part, A, to cover the Integra heat AC unit, and B, just to balance everything out cosmetically with the shell being a slightly different shape now. So we could have used the Allegro upper dash, but there were just too many things stacking up against us. You know, we wanted to use slightly different air vents, because the Allegro ones, they're not very nicely made. They've got little rusty pins in them where the pivots are. They just don't look great. The heater controls are no longer in the same place. They've moved down to below because we're using the Integra heater controls. We wanted to change, well, we were keeping the rough shape of the instrument binnacle, but one of the cars had a 2-clock dash and the other one had a wider, I guess it's a 6-clock dash. So we would have needed to modify one of the dashes anyway. Plus we've made it deeper, so we were going to have to do some kind of transition from the deeper front section to the original Allegro dash. And they had some cracks and things in the vinyl, and it just kind of was stacking up to be not really worth trying to modify the original. It would have just been a bit of a bodge. Now originally they're a metal frame that is then laid into a mould and foam is cast around it, and then it has vinyl vacuum formed over it. Now we wanted to use the frame, we needed something sort of structural in there. I didn't really want to risk an entire sort of unsupported mass of 3D prints. So we thought what we'll do is we'll use the metal frame, we'll take all the foam off, and then we'll model in CAD the whole exterior shape of the dash, but then basically cut the rear of it to the shape of the metal frame from the scan we could do of the metal frame, which is exactly what we've done. So actually earlier this week we had the metal frame in this one, and for the first time we'd got all the 3D printed sections done. We were laying those out, and true to form, you're always a bit worried about the accuracy of the scan, but true to form, they sit perfectly onto the metal frame. They're going to give us the shape we want. As I was talking earlier about seam details as well, it's allowed us, modelling it all in CAD has allowed us to put seams in exactly where we want them and make sure the leather's all going to sit perfect. So yeah, that's all looking good. So next step on that is we're going to bond all of those sections together. We're going to bond them all to the metal frame. That'll need a bit of manual smoothing out, etc. So when we leather it, you don't see any kind of defects coming through from the prints. And then once we've got that upper in, we're going to have the lower section. There's like a central, the bit that kind of rises from the tunnel on the floor up to the underside of the upper dash. That's going to be printed by a subcontractor, because I want that in one piece, because there's not really a metal framework within that. I don't want it to have bonded joints in that. So we're having an SLS print done of that, also in nylon. Now that is a slightly different printing method. So our prints are basically a plastic filament. It's like a wire of plastic, if you like, that goes through an extruder head which melts it, and the machine then just moves around building up layers, kind of like squeezing out a toothpaste tube, but much more accurate and small until it's built up the shape. SLS printing is actually laser sintering, so it starts with essentially a box full of powder, for want of a slightly more detailed explanation, and a laser sets its focal length within that box and moves around and basically melts the plastic powder together into a three-dimensional shape, and then once you're finished, all of the loose, non-fused powder just goes away, and you pull out the part that you actually want. And there's also another method that does similar, but within a resin, like a laser-cured resin. So we are going to sort out that central part, and once we've got that in place and the upper, and we're happy with the fit of those, we can then move on to leathering all of that and making the final lower sections. So there's the sections that sit above the driver and passenger's feet are, again, 3D printed sections, but I want to get the first two pieces in first, and double check the fit. It's always wise. It's all very well at looking perfect in the CAD, but occasionally you get slight warps in the scans where you've done a very, very big pass from one side of the car to the other. You might get slight dimensional inaccuracies, and although it would be possible to address all of those by doing a vast number of dimensional checks, in reality it makes more sense to have some parts in place and then rescan and recheck the fit of the next parts just to be 100% sure. So yeah, exciting to see all of that start to come together, because they're kind of the missing pieces of the puzzle on the interior on these. I am now going to hand over to George to tell you about what he's been up to on the DBS.
Okay, hello, thank you, Cal. So this week slash a bit of last week, I've been working on a smattering of different things, but mainly been Aston Martin chassis. So it's moved on a little bit since you last saw it. It's getting pretty well there now. The kind of core of the chassis is kind of in, all the braces are in. Because of the geometry of this suspension, which we've talked about before, everything kind of sits at a funky angle. So we've had to do a couple of different methods of holding and jigging the different parts, which is why it looks a bit skeletal at the moment. But we're maybe thinking of cutting some of these bits off once it's fabricated, but we'll see. It depends on strength, and there's still a couple of little tweaks that need doing. Some other little bits I've been working on with this has been getting all the Ackerman right. So obviously a C7 Corvette, which is what the suspension's from, is slightly longer than a Aston Martin DBS. So we've done some working to get the Ackerman right. I've created this little model to demonstrate what Ackerman is. I'm not going to explain what Ackerman is because that's a tangent which no one wants. But long story short, we've got a decent turning circle and the Ackerman should be about right for the length of the car, which is good. I'm trying to think what else I've been doing. So, also been figuring out what steering rack we're using. As what seems to be with a lot of projects, we're going to be going for a Mondeo steering rack. The reason for this is the ball-to-ball end pivot locations. I don't know what they're called. They're going to be about right for what we need, so that's going to work out nicely. So I've just scanned one of those, and we'll be modelling that. I'm modelling it at the moment. Which, to be fair, if we go into here, here's my progress. And yeah, been working on a smattering of other things, which I won't mention now, but will come to light in the coming weeks, I'm sure. Passing over to Luke.
Hi guys, welcome back to the CAD cabin. This week is a short update for me. There's not a lot of new stuff that I've been on with. It's kind of just been going through a list of reviewed parts from Cal. So coming back from the Christmas break, Cal had a bit of time, very busy man, to sit down and go through a lot of my work, which I've been just ticking through over the last couple of months, and specifically some of the stuff that we're focusing on pushing forward at the minute. A few things so Richard can get moving on a few things and everything. So it's been a lot of little things, adding trim details to the Allegro lower dash section, for example, which Richard did this lovely little sample on. This has got foam on it. It's going to look a lot more like what you see here, where it's tight and you see the shape a lot better afterwards. But just had a look at that now, and that's nearly ready to be printed. I think that one's getting subcontracted. And then separately to that as well, adding trim details to the Churchill rear quarter card. So again, this is just a little sample we made earlier, where added the trim detail into a particularly complex area, had Richard trim it, he's happy with it. So we're going to start splitting down the full card into sectional 3D prints, getting them printed, getting them made, and getting them on the car. And then other than that, it's just been loads of like really small things, like just little things that I missed here and there, little things that needs to be changed. Getting the prototypes on the E-Type, we've got the client coming in for that. And I think you'll remember from a few weeks ago, I did the rear lights for that car, a mirror design for that car. So I've got those printed now, got them painted semi-appropriate colours, and they're on the car. Honestly, I think they look great. I'm really, really happy with that. I really hope the client liked it too. But yeah, other than that, hopefully starting on something new again pretty soon. Cheers, guys.
Thank you very much, Luke. And actually, one thing I forgot to mention was the engine for the second Integra Allegro, which James is on with the build of now. So he, I think last week he just had the block there with the pistons and rods in, and he's just going through the motions now, basically, of building it all up. So what we'll perhaps do, maybe next week, try and do a bit of a montage of that engine going together. But yeah, on that note, I'm going to leave it, and I'll see you next week.